Arc Wyverns have to be one of the most diverse groups in the Arc franchise, or at least in the Arc dinosaur catalog in general. Fire, poison, and lightning started it, then Arctic came, then Crystal and Tropical came, and then finally Blood Crystal Wyverns actually came. But today we're going to see if these guys can all honestly survive Monster Hunter and the various different ways they would actually have to compete and survive in the environment. Let's begin.
Now, starting off with the easiest one, yeah, believe it or not, the Ice Wyvern's actually the easiest one I had to cover on this list. And this actually says a lot about what I actually have to talk about with the tropical or the coastal Wyverns and the, whatchamacallit, the desert Wyverns, excuse me. So, obviously, when it comes to breeding and their behavior, ice wyverns actually lay their eggs on the ground in an area where they can monitor it. Now, I know in the Lost Island, there is a cliff area where the ice wyverns do inhabit and they are able to, lay their egg and leave it there. However, there are also only around 2 to 3 ice wyverns in the area, meaning they don't live in large groups on occasion, but they will pretty much hunt you down if they see you, taking another member's egg. So this does mean that the ice wyverns are a bit spread out, but again, they still do stay in a range or at least a radius within each other. And in the Monster Hunter world, that is actually pretty good because considering that we are throwing 20, of each wyverns, or basically going the average number that we actually see in Ragnarok, which I do believe is around like 5 to 10 members at a time in Ragnarok, at least from what I've seen in the old games, because Ragnarok never had a control, or Arc, the original Arc really never had a control over how much creatures were spawning in and ascended. I feel like that's kind of worse, but it is what it is. But believe it or not, they actually have a decent advantage because over the other wyverns, because there are really no egg thieves in the Arctic. We don't see Kuliaku in the Arctic, and Great Baggy isn't even an egg thief, so they wouldn't even try it. And if they did, they would get eaten promptly. Now, as for the prey animals, they do have things like Cortos, the whatchamacallit, the Cortos, which are basically these flying little snake wyverns, but which is actually pretty interesting. And then we also have the Anteca, which again should be familiar prey animals considering what they preyed on previously. Then we also have the Wolgs as well. Now, the Wolgs, if you guys don't know, are actually fanged wyverns. These guys would actually, again, also, be little reminders as well of, I guess you could say, the Arctic regions. And then we also have, funny enough, we also have the, the popos as well. These are all prey animals that would be great for the ice wyvern to casually feed on. And considering the fact that wyverns can carry things up to I think a stego or a Carnotaurus's height, yeah, a popo should be no problem at all. But then again, they might be a little heavier, so maybe young popo would actually be getting carried. But considering the fact that in old Ark, these prey animals would actually be very comforting. Considering the fact that in the Arctic regions, we do know they would have preyed upon the likes of Megaloceros, which is the, residential deer, Megatherium, Mammoth. By the way, what would an Arc Mastodon even do? What would an Arc Paleoloxodon even do? Yo, is anyone cooking up that? But let me know. And also, they would also feed on the smaller predators of the area, like the dire wolves and the daedons, the perlovias. All of these creatures would be great food for a wyvern. I mean, they provide plenty of meat from, again, a more, obviously, a realistic spectrum and stuff like that. However, when it came to competition, which we'll be getting into soon, they actually had to deal with Rexes, and mainly, if we're really talking about the Arctic, the Carnotaurus and the Eutyrannus were the main kings of the Arctic. Still are, by the way. Might have to get them for Ragnarok because, again, it's been a while since I actually got a Eutyrannus in general. But with that being said here, yeah, I think the ice wyverns would really not have too much to worry about when it comes to competition, considering they live on higher altitudes. And the only ones I could really see threatening them or even hunting them are the likes of Barioth, which I think would actually be their only natural predator. And Fulgur Anjanath would possibly be on occasion if it's able to catch one lacking. Barioth and Fulgur Anjanath are really monsters that don't have problem preying upon and eating other monsters. Now you might say, oh well, why aren't you bringing up Tigrex? It's also an Arctic creature that preys upon other monsters. Again, the altitude. They live on higher, rocky ice cliffs and stuff like that, and simply go out to hunt for themselves. So that would be the only way they'll pretty much be able to get it. And again, keep in mind, ice wyvern babies are born blue, which means they actually have good camouflage for their environment. The same way Barioth cubs also have, great camouflage for their environment because they're naturally born white. So with that being said, Fulgur Anjanath and Barioth would be occasional predators. However, I think one creature that I think could be a main predator, like a constant thorn or a constant predator in the wyverns or the ice wyverns, or pretty much preying upon the ice wyverns, excuse me, would be Onoru Palitsu. Now, if you guys don't know what Onoru Palitsu is, he's a flying wyvern that possesses dragon element and has no problem eating other monsters, as he's actually been seen eating the likes of Georogu. So not only does this mean the ice wyverns would actually have a little bit of struggle here, but again, they would likely thrive compared to the other ones. Considering the ice wyverns themselves already have their natural camouflage, this does mean they can escape a lot of predators, and considering their young also have it as well, they really wouldn't have it either. But if you really want some competition, if they are in the Hoarfrost reach, then this means they would likely compete for territory with the likes of Shrieking Legiana and regular Legiana, considering they both do dominate these more higher rocky and snowy outcrops as well. So this means that the wyverns may actually nest in more ice gorge like areas rather than staying on to like the higher areas. Again, it does depend on where they nest. I know in Crystal Isles there is a area where there are ice, like an ice wyvern gorge or whatnot. But overall, do I think the ice wyverns actually do well in Monster Hunter? Yes. And I'm actually going to say this, they're the best ones on this list in all honesty. But with that being said here, that does it for them, and let's get into the longer ones, unfortunately. Now, on to the second shortest one on the list, the tropical wyverns. Now, these guys are actually found in, well, you guessed it, Ragnarok. And these guys actually live on a more coastal area. This is an area I have actually died, like, at least twice because curiosity killed the cat and my RG ran out of stamina at the worst time. And this was my first time figuring out that RGs cannot escape a wyvern. Yeah, so, unfortunately, the consequences of my actions pretty much happen. But nevertheless, the wyverns actually live around this area, this southeastern corner part, which is actually in between the desert and the inside of it is a cave with some piranhas and the extra stuff in there. But they actually do compete with predators that I've actually been able to see down there. For starters, they actually do compete with baryonyx and the goat on any sort of, arc type of map, the Spinosaurus. Yeah, they compete with our boy out here. But yes, they do compete with, the Spinosaurus and all that. They already have, this interesting little rivalry, I guess you could say. And believe it or not, I actually do think it's pretty interesting because the Spinosaurus is down there. You at least see like 2 or 3 at the most, and they are able to beat some of the wyverns out there. But keep in mind, they do swarm the area. In terms of prey animals that they normally have down there, obviously it's more or less like the beginner ones, such as moss chops, parasaurs, trikes. But believe it or not, there are megalania because, again, like in Ragnarok, megalanias will spawn on the beaches of certain areas in Ragnarok. Thank God they don't spawn in the beginner area because that would have been absolutely a nightmare. Yo, please don't do that. But ARC devs or ARC creators, please don't do that. And they also have the occasional iguanodon. Now, there is an area where there is a giga, but it really doesn't come down there. Albeit, I might lure it down there if Arc does the same thing again. But hey, you never know. And then we also have, the standard trike and stuff like that, like I said earlier. So they actually had a pretty decent food source. And keep in mind that there was still fire, poison, darkness even, which is actually pretty interesting, and one more. I think it was like water, or well, it was fire, lightning, poison, and darkness. I think that was the only ones pretty much there. But with that being said here, yeah, Monster Hunter has plenty of areas that have like coastal waters and stuff like that, and areas that they can honestly pretty much survive and thrive, in all honesty. However, because they do nest in caves, I do assume that there would definitely be some cave-like areas around, or maybe they'll actually have coastal areas, and then a group of wyverns would probably have to stay in the caves, meaning that, well, some of the wyverns would actually be nest guardians while the others actually do the hunting. And considering they do kind of live in like a communal setting where they all help each other raise their young, I do think that the wyverns will likely do this, meaning that Aptonoth and Slagtoth, which would be the only prey items around coastal areas. Now, Kelby and obviously like whatchamacallit, some of the smaller raptorial bird wyverns and drones and stuff like that would all get snatched up and just dragged off. And if any, apes come to the region, which we will, or, come to the coast, which we will discuss, the main one that actually goes down there, I actually don't see a problem with them actually having, this type of food available. And this means that some of the wyverns will likely be eating their kills out there, and some of them will likely be dragging kills back to the nest, and then likely going out and hunting, or if not, just eating the kills with the rest of the wyverns that do, help guard the nest. And this will actually help them here, because this means that they can actually maintain a stable population and maintain a stable, nest guard as well. As for other larger monsters that I think they would eat, Shogun Centurion and Diamond Hermiter easily fit the bill, as well as, the centaurs and hermitors that normally would inhabit these coastal regions. They all fit the bill. No matter how much you really want to say that they could either maybe snatch a wyvern out the air, the wyverns aren't really going to get close unless they really have to. Plus, these guys work together. This means that they might as well just start burrowing and get away. Otherwise, it's cooked crab. All right, with an extra side of shell. Okay, so pretty much, I see no problem with these two here, unless it's like a one-on-one, and then obviously these guys should be able to maybe beat a wyvern one-on-one. You guys have seen a large majority of my Ark survival videos. The wyverns are like multi-city block level, just for like two of them destroying an entire kingdom, at least by the dossier portfolio. But as for other large monsters, like I said earlier, there was an ape that actually visited the coast and actually lived there and raised their young, this being the Gogamoa, which is basically a fanged beast that unfortunately has its child constantly in battle. Dear Lord, was child abuse really a thing in Monster Hunter Frontier? I don't think I really paid attention to that as well. But believe it or not, the coast is actually one of the few places that some monsters can live. However, you might be saying, oh, well, what about the caves? What about the caves? Yes, I understand. Because those are usually inhabited by the likes of Kezu and Giganox. Now, I'm not sure if, Kezu is relegated to the Arctic as well as Giganox. But again, we do know that Giggies do inhabit regions all across the entirety of Monster Hunter. And I do believe that the Giganoxes do have subspecies out there in caves. And the same with Kezu, as we also know that Red Kezu does exist. So this does mean that the wyverns may even encounter and likely kill and eat a Giganox. I mean, what's a poison from a Giganox going to do to a poison wyvern? I never seen a poison wyvern die to its own poison. I'm not sure if that's a game mechanic or if that's just a normal thing. But yeah, these two would definitely get killed and eaten, and it's very possible they will likely get eradicated. So that means that some of the caves will probably have multiple dead corpses of things like Giganox and Kezu. Now, next off, we have the Leviathans for the competition. And this is actually pretty simple, right? While, oh, I almost forgot. Plesioth would also be competition. Sorry if I did not put him in this part, but yes, he would also be competition. And very possibly, if he does something stupid, like try to attack a group of wyverns, he will get ambushed or pretty much mobbed and eaten. But again, a successful ambush near the water, and they should pretty much have it. But Lagiacrus and the likes of Royal Ludroth would actually be main competitors for territory. Considering the coastal wyverns would definitely inhabit some of the best parts of Monster Hunters, like whatchamacallit, coast and coastal beaches, river streams, and stuff like that. Yeah, this is actually a problem. While Lagiacrus definitely just has the territorial thing, Royal Ludroth would likely not only have territorial disputes, but also predation attempts on its harem. Meaning that Royal Ludroth would likely have to guard its harem a lot more, and if not, this may cause the, untraditional sense that two males may be needed to guard their harem, which is actually pretty interesting, but it can happen. But maybe for another predator, I actually thought of Beruga Garu. Now, Beruga Garu is actually capable of feeding on the poison wyverns, and I actually do think it would go out of its way to try and eat them. It's very possible it may even utilize its habit for going into caves, and could likely utilize its tongue, if not just ambush one from the water and snatch one up and drag it in to extract its poison and its poison enzymes to actually fill its blood. Not sure if that would enhance them, considering how art creatures do function, but again, it would be a much more worthwhile meal than a iodrome or an entire iodrome pack. So unfortunately for the tropical poison wyvern, it ain't gonna go that way. But next off, we actually have Nakarkos. Now, Nakarkos is a predator that will snatch prey from the coast, which actually might explain how it does get Glavenus, Oregon, Brachydios, and Glavenus, plus even Rathlos, which is absolutely ridiculous. This dude was eating good. But we also have the fact that it does hunt Lagiacrus. So it's very possible that it may even utilize its skeletal remains to maybe lure the Nakarkos into striking distance, and then just simply grab him, drag him beneath the depths, and it's GG's at that point. So with that being said here, actually, I think one more predator actually does fit this, and that is Parparia. Now, Parparia, if you guys have watched my Parparia ecology video, where I talk about how he's able to hunt and kill Rajangs, is very, very lethal. This is a creature that not only has a bone-crushing bite strong enough to crunch through the muscles of a Rajang, but also has a venomous bite, okay? Or maybe venomous saliva. And the fact that it can just take down Rajang, actually utilize water to ambush like crocodiles and stuff like that, or even like the other Leviathans and Piscine wyverns like Plesioth, I actually do think it is fair, and again, fair to say that these wyverns would be in trouble in certain occasions. But again, considering the overall large population of having multiple wyverns and even multiple diversity of wyverns as well, it's very possible that the Leviathans and the many wyverns and fanged beasts and stuff like that that do inhabit coast would have to move. It's also possible that Giganox and Kezu would likely remain in the Arctic and even raise their children, or make sure their children are diverted into the Arctic a lot more than their other regions. As for actual predators, Beruga Garu, Nakarkos, and Parparia are all suitable predators to keep the wyvern population down, as obviously having the hunters do it all the time can sometimes be a little bit messed up, as again, they would have to really kill and classify each and every wyvern you see here before you. But overall, do the tropical wyverns actually survive in Monster Hunter? Yes, they do. Probably a little bit difficulty, but definitely great. On to the next one. Now, finally, we're here at the desert wyverns. Poison, lightning, and fire. Obviously one of the easier ones, but again, it did require the most detail, as the desert region is a very detailed biome. Now, let's start with it very simple. The Gorge. Wyvern Trench, as we all call it. And I do believe it is called some type of splinter or crag in the Ragnarok map or whatever, or the World Scorn is what I think it's called. But with that being said, Yeah, this is actually pretty interesting because the wyverns themselves live here. You'll only see maybe one or two of them leave to probably explore their environment and then maybe or eventually come back. But again, you'll occasionally see a poison wyvern or fire or lightning wyvern. One of them is going to be out and about away from their home or away from their original area. But with that being said here, yeah, what do they actually prey upon? Believe it or not, in some, instances, you can actually find basilisks here. Yeah, believe it or not, you can find basilisks in the wyvern trench, especially if you just, add them on and stuff like that. But as for the standard creatures that are normally around the trench, you would have the following: mantises, thorny dragons, paraceratheriums, saber-tooths, daeodons, what else? Terror birds, okay? And pretty much, if you could possibly do it, maybe even a death worm as well. So believe it or not, the wyverns themselves, or the desert wyverns, basically have a well-rounded diet of medium-sized to somewhat small prey animals as well. And keep in mind, the most fulfilling here is the Paraceratherium. With, oh yeah, I almost forgot, Morellotopses are also out here as well, and well, obviously they're not doing too much against any of the wyverns in general. And oh yeah, Kentrosaurus as well. I keep forgetting they are a part of the Ark game. I do feel like it is ridiculous that they are not more noticeable than they should, but this is because the Stegosauri are just simply a very underrated class of herbivore outside of, well, stegosaurus themselves, unfortunately. Yeah. But believe it or not, yeah, with Paraceratherium being likely their biggest prey animal in the region, unless you actually, well, actually, Dinotherium. Almost forgot about him too. Dinotherium and Paraceratherium are actually the largest prey animals within the region. So believe it or not, these guys would actually be the more satisfying prey animals for the wyverns. However, keep in mind, they are still incredibly dangerous nevertheless. So believe it or not, the wyverns already have an extensive diet of herbivorous and carnivorous animals. So what does the desert of Monster Hunter provide? And believe it or not, despite how it looks most of the time, it seems that most food can be scarce, Monster Hunter Desert actually provides a banquet of creatures and animals that they can honestly eat. And keep in mind, the environment itself is actually very fitting for all of these wyverns. However, considering they don't have an area like the World Scar or the Wyvern Trench, it's very possible they may nest in gorges. And I think that would actually be pretty interesting. Maybe they could even make their own gorge as well. Or we could probably transfer the World Scar to Monster Hunter in general, but yeah, I kind of like to see how these creatures would adapt to an environment. But again, there are deeper, gorges and canyons where the wyverns can ultimately raise their young. And believe it or not, there are deeper parts of the desert and even some interlocking caves, which also could prove to be, useful to them. Considering, as I just discussed with the coastal wyverns, despite the fact they live on the coast, they still nest in caves. So it's very possible they could do the same thing. Now, in terms of prey items they would actually be able to eat, Apsaros is the most satisfying out of all of them, especially when it's considered the fact that all other creatures prey upon them, and considering the fact that the wyverns can just simply burn acid or electrocute, burn, melt, and electrocute them. Basically, all the Apsaros is, they may even be able to take an entire herd out, which may include surplus killing. But again, it's very possible that if creatures are not near their gorge areas, they may not go out of their way. They may go out of their way to actually eat them. Then there's also Kestodon and Reniflos. Two of these creatures could definitely prove to be a very decent meal for the wyverns in general. I would probably say that Reniflos is likely more satisfying than Kestodon, considering it does have a bit more meat. Then we do have some of the smaller raptorial bird wyverns in the area, like Great Jaggy and Velociprey as well, and Velocidrome. So those guys would obviously be eaten. And this is because velociprey do have just simply bad luck with choosing where and when to go and just wind up on somebody's menu or in somebody's hitbox. So unfortunately, it's going to happen. Next off, we also have cephalodrome. Yes, cephalodrome and cephalos would also be on the menu. I don't see cephalos really being near wyvern territory too much, and I can actually see this being a moment where they're like just passing by and they just get spotted by a wyvern and then just simply bombarded from the air until it's pretty much GG. Now, keep in mind, considering the fact that some of these wyverns do go out to explore their environment and to hunt as well, it is very possible we will likely see cephalodrome and Pookie Pookie as well also get hunted. Pookie Pookie is a rather interesting one, considering the fact that it would stay in more vegetative areas. Even if you did put it in like Ark, it would be nowhere near the wyvern trance. It would be like deep within like the more oasis and desert like areas, pretty much feasting upon the many nuts in the area. Now, in terms of that, I would also say maybe Gerototus, maybe Baroth as well. Diablos is an absolute no. I don't even see that happening, as well as with Rusted Rambros. Albeit Rusted Rambros is when they're alone, could get mobbed by a group of wyverns. But again, that could likely wind up getting them all killed. So believe it or not, wyverns do have some pretty similar and pretty straightforward competition, or prey atoms, excuse me. But speaking of competition, let's actually talk about it. Considering the fact that they have been officially added to the game, we can actually add the acros to the list of carnivores that would prove to be very, if not far too formidable for the for the wyverns here, as well as rexes. And if you get the evil mod as well, you do have Tarbosaurus, so those guys count. And then also the original mod for the game also had Tarbosaurus as the top tier dog, even being able to take out rock golems. Crazy work, right? Then we also have Eutyrannus and the Carnotauruses that also inhabit the mountain regions and would likely compete with them for things like Paraceratherium and Dinotherium as well. So believe it or not, these guys have an extensive way or an extensive form of competition. The only thing I could probably say is a possible predator is definitely deathworms, because they'll eat anything. Rexes, Carnos, Fasolasuchuses as well. Oh, I almost forgot about them, considering they are added to the game. Maybe I'll consider getting them for Scorched Earth, but I'm not too, fond of the idea. But yes, they obviously would have some competition, believe it or not. But considering the fact that the wyverns themselves really don't leave their territory too much, this is actually going to be because they actually do leave their territory. And I actually do think they will encounter, obviously, everyone's favorite desert bully, Steve. Now, Steve, or Seregios here, is actually very capable of killing a wyvern one-on-one. However, if it does try anything foolish and tries to go near the nest to try and raid and steal a hatchling, believe it or not, I actually do think he would get swarmed, and if he doesn't figure out how to use their slow returning maneuver against them, he's gonna die. But even then, their firepower kind of covers their returning maneuver. And then next off, we have Nibblesnarf. Now, Nibblesnarf can actually be seen as a predator as well, probably a once-in-a-while one, being able to ambush a wyvern as it probably lands for its kill or just waits for the opportunity. Glavenus as well, probably a very rare occurrence of competition, but it could definitely predate on any wyverns that are just simply caught lacking or injured from some reason. And believe it or not, I actually do think the wyverns will actually be able to benefit another monster here in a little bit. But let's go over the rest of it. Tigrex, very rare occurrence. I don't see Tigrex going near a wyvern gorge unless it's really trying to steal a kill. But even then, that would absolutely be desperation and a suicide attempt at the same time. So yeah, unless Tigrex is just hunting a wyvern that's already out in the open and away from the World Scar or the new Wyvern Gorge or whatever, it's not going to happen. So believe it or not, the wyverns themselves actually do survive pretty well because of not only their communal setup, but because of their, vast diversity and versatility. However, I do think there is a predator for them, and that would actually be Barioth and, honorable mention, rayed out. I could actually see Barryoth utilizing things like sandstorms and, even increasing them with his sand ability or his sand manipulation, which allows him to basically become this phantom of the storms and stuff like that. Matter of fact, maybe I'll actually put that in the Scorched Earth video when I actually do Can These Desert Monsters Survive Scorched Earth? And yes, I will be doing kind of a reverse of the situation, but considering Monster Hunter monsters have so much detail, I will only be doing 3 and try to balance them out. So with that being said, yes, Sam Barryoth is very likely capable of utilizing things like sandstorms and stuff like that to actually be able to camouflage itself, and would definitely be able to snatch up a wyvern, even a wyvern chick, believe it or not, and just simply leave. So, believe it or not, let's see here. What could the wyverns actually contribute to the environment? And believe it or not, I actually think this is one of the only few wyverns I could definitely see forming a symbiotic relationship. Considering the fact that the wyverns are just genetically diverse and genetically different, I would actually say they could befriend, or maybe in another way around, Rathian could befriend them and just wind up getting new allies as well. You see, in the desert, Rathians are single. Like, they just, they made it with the Rathalos and just said, all right, guess I'm going to the desert because he chose the other female over me. And so, with that being said here, Rathians themselves nesting with the wyverns would actually be smart and strategic on her part, as if she dies, other wyverns would step up. And I kind of see this interaction being funny, where Rathian does kind of go to the edge of the wyvern gorge, and a poison wyvern is the one to determine whether or not she can just come and go. And so they kind of just look at each other for a minute, and it's just like, you know what? You valid, come on here. And you just start seeing like a whole bunch of Rathians now in that gorge. And so this may encourage like Rathian, if not Ping Rathian, to be a bit more aggressive. But this will also mean that they actually can avoid their biggest op, Seregios. As imagine having to physically deal with a Rathian while being flanked by multiple other elemental wyverns on the side. So believe it or not, I could actually see it. Maybe there's a possibility of them even crossbreeding with each other, and well, a new wyvern could be born out of Rathian and, let's just say, the poison wyvern, something like that. But overall, yeah, they actually do pretty great. But let's move on to the last one.
Alright, so now we can finally end this off with the Blood Crystal Wyverns and the Crystal Wyvern Queen. I'm honestly going to keep this in just one go, okay? Because again, this was long as it is, and I hope you guys made it to the end. If you guys made it this far, type in Blood Queen in the comment section. So believe it or not, these Crystal Wyverns actually live in an oasis like den cave, or an oasis gorge, if you will, where they do prey upon the same creatures as the desert wyverns, probably a bit lesser, but again, there still are things like the what's it called, thorny dragons, mantises, Argentavis every now and then, Procoptodons, and I do believe the occasional Rex will somehow find itself in there. Dear God, you had to be the most unlucky Rex to be down there when I was playing that. But anywho, with that being said here, they actually do lay their eggs both on cliffs and pretty much out in the open. But again, just like the other wyverns, they patrol the area around their eggs and stuff so that, no one can get to them and stuff. So yeah, it's not, it's not too bad for these wyverns and stuff. But believe it or not, I think this will actually benefit them though, especially with the fact that the Crystal Wyvern Queen or the Blood Wyvern Queen will also be there. And this actually would likely help the population maybe overgrow, considering during the fight, she can actually like give live birth, and I think I'm traumatizing myself by actually just thinking about this. She's giving live birth during the fight, and they actually grow within like a couple seconds. Now, again, that could be a game mechanic, but it also could be part of her abilities, or at least part of her biology. And then those wyverns go to breed with each other and just lay eggs. Maybe that kind of explains why the eggs don't last very long in care, because they're inbred. Now, I'm not saying, that, okay, well, I mean, it is a bad thing, but I'm just, it kind of explains a lot about the Wyvern population and why it's able to grow so much. There's probably just a lack of genetic diversity, but maybe their DNA just really doesn't need it. It's kind of weird. Considering the fact that she can reproduce asexually, then the others can't, or maybe can as well. But it's very interesting how she can actually have both male and female offspring, and then just, you know, uh, yeah, I think you guys get what I'm saying here. But believe it or not, their abilities are pretty simple. Some of these guys actually do have the standard blood manipulation where they are able to basically breathe out this blood blast, which not only heals them, but also zaps the opponent of their life energy, with the only way being able to put them down is, well, with rapid fire or rapid attacks and stuff like that. So that being said here, considering the Crystal Wyvern Queen, or the Blood Wyvern Queen, also is capable of living in forests, and her children are capable of living in deserts, which would translate to her as well. I do think that it would be safe to say that they would likely be a huge threat to entire regions altogether, or at least the desert and forest biomes, considering the fact that the Crystal Wyvern Queen, or the Queen Wyvern, can just simply mass reproduce a lot of her offspring before it probably does take a little bit out of her. I'm not sure how many she can reproduce asexually in just one go, but I do remember seeing like at least 5 or 10 coming out of her. And again, I'm just traumatizing myself as I keep saying this, but this does mean that she could devastate an ecosystem. She's definitely a problem, and it's very possible you could possibly put her on par with the other bosses like the Megapithecus, the Dinopithecus King, and, well, the dragon as well. Probably she would be a little weaker than the dragon, but I guess that's just up for debate. But it is what it is. So with that being said, she would definitely be able to prey and pretty much have her children swarm and attack other animals. Even the larger likes of Duramboros could likely kill a few, but again would eventually get overwhelmed by the bunch here. And considering the fact that she also does have fire breath, yeah, this makes her a whole different kind of, or a whole different breed of a threat, to be honest. So how does the Monster Hunter world pretty much just counter? In all honesty, unlike most of these wyverns, they would actually be able to live peacefully. The Arctic, the fire, lightning, poison, even the regular tropical wyverns are able to live peacefully. However, her, yeah, this may be a moment where there's a scourge operation from the guild. Now, what do I mean by a scourge operation? This means that they're going to be taking everything they have and straight up annihilating the wyvern population, or at least decimating it enough to where it's in the controlled numbers. However, they definitely won't be alone in this. But here's what I actually can picture, right? Considering the wyvern population, or the blood wyvern population, would definitely get out of hand, they would actually send in a team to exterminate the hive. This would mean you would have hunters and likely some of the guild's heaviest weaponries and stuff like that on the back of cars, or, sorry, not cars, carriages and stuff like that. So maybe they would even set up outside of the wyvern area and just start bombarding them while the hunters go into the main hall or into the main nesting room and simply start exterminating wyverns, making their way to the Crystal Wyvern Queen. That would be the best way I could honestly interpret an entire story for it. And maybe I'll add that to the second half of What If Godzilla Wasn't Monster Hunter. Just adding a whole Crystal Wyvern Queen outbreak and stuff like that. And it's just overall devastating, right? But with that being said here, yeah, I don't see the guild really letting the Crystal Wyvern Queen honestly just populate at that point. And then this does mean that the Crystal Wyverns would eventually, reproduce with each other, and then bada bing, bada boom, a new population is pretty much formed. Or basically, this is where once in every maybe 10 years or 5 years, a new Crystal Wyvern Queen is born, and she goes to have her own environment. And then, next thing you know, it does happen all over again. However, this does mean the Crystal Wyvern Queens would definitely attract Nergigante, who really doesn't care about the environment that he's in. And I actually found it interesting because he'll still go to things like the Coral Highlands and the Hoarfrost Reach. The reason why we just don't see it as often is because, again, kind of like game mechanics plus having Nergigante in every region would be kind of annoying, kind of like Devil Joe. But with that being said here, yeah, she's not standing a chance against Nergigante or even Runer Nergigante, to be honest. So that means the Crystal Wyvern Queens, when they're born, are actually going to have to be on their toes 24/7 because, again, one mishap or one mistake, one slip up, and Nergigante's on those cheeks. But believe it or not, I do think one of the few Elder Dragons that can likely benefit from this is Black Veil Valhazak, likely keeping the Wyvern population in check, while also maybe using its effluvium to get a couple minions, getting a couple minions and having them as his like bodyguards and stuff like that, which would actually make the Black Veil, Valhazak fight pretty interesting. Imagine having to deal with Crystal Wyvern bodyguards or Fluvium, Wyvern bodyguards and stuff like that, while also dealing with Black Veil Valhazak, and then you could just make an armor out of it. Plus, I do think the Crystal Wyvern Queen would probably be the main armor, but again, you would have to likely collect parts from other Wyverns or Crystal Wyverns and stuff like that, just to pretty much just finish it off. But overall, how do I feel about the Wyverns in Monster Hunter? By the way, if you're wondering how, like, the Wyverns would be able to interact with the guild if they collect their eggs and stuff, they would basically be like it in Arc, except not only having a more combat mount or an effective combat mount would be great, but also being able to have a companion that can easily handle a lot of the transportation needs of the guild far more effectively. But overall, I do think that the Arc Wyverns would absolutely do great in Monster Hunter. I think the Frost Wyverns will actually do the best because of their camouflage, how their eggs and babies work, and honestly, they would all be fine. I really think they ought to be fine. It's just that the Frost Wyvern will likely have less casualties within its species. But that's going to be all for today, you guys. Please comment down below, like and subscribe, and share with your friends. This is Legendary Grimlock, and I hope you guys have a blessed day. Peace.